Welcome back to Volt Academy.
Today we are going to be talking about movement progressions. I get a lot of questions from individual athletes about why certain movements appear in their programming that might be a little bit easier or maybe beginner level or something like that, like a body weight movement or a dumbbell movement rather than jumping straight into like a barbell back squat.
Right, and I get a lot of the same questions from coaches, which is great. It's great that they're asking those questions because they're going to be running the weight room,
Right.
making sure athletes stay safe and being able to communicate why they're doing things a certain way. So I think we can go ahead and just jump right in and start out with the basic question of what is a movement progression. And I think very simply it refers to which movements you're going to do in your programming and how you're going to set up the order of execution for those movements.
Yeah.
Right. So it's pretty common for strength conditioning to use primary movements as staples in programming to drive strength and power. For example, back squats or front squats, bench press, some pretty common movements that are often used as pillars within a strength training program. However, not everybody is ready to do a back squat right away. Right? And so it's important that we set athletes up for success at the beginning of their program. So then eventually we might get to those more compound movements, but we make sure that we're safe with the start of the programming and we set them up for success later on in their programming as well.
Right. Yep. So I want to be able to have a nice solid foundation in movement patterns for a squat or whatever, and even strength to perform that squat before loading up the bar.
Totally. Yeah. We want to always emphasize movement over maxes is kind of the maxim that people use, but we always want to emphasize proper movement before anything else. And so as an example with that squat that we were talking about, you might start with a body weight squat variation with an athlete, maybe because it's the most approachable movement for them, or maybe they're able to execute that body weight squat with proficiency. And once they're able to do that, then you can start to load them up, but you're going to choose something like a dumbbell goblet squat, which helps put them in a better position, helps them learn that squat pattern while introducing some external load. Then once they become very proficient in that movement, you might go to maybe a dumbbell front squat or a barbell front squat. And then eventually, again, you can see how this process continues from prove that you're proficient, introduce a greater challenge, prove that you're proficient, and eventually go towards that bigger compound movement.
A progression over time, which also brings me to a question that we get a lot, which is, why do I see a lot of movements reoccurring week to week in my programming? And that's the answer right there, right? You want to be able to build that proficiency.
Exactly. We got to give you multiple chances to show that you can master the movement, right? We can't just expect you to master a dumbbell goblet front squat after just 1 week of doing it. So we'll repeat it, and we'll give you a little bit more weight each week. So we'll progressively overload that same movement week to week. And you won't spend a ton of time doing the same movement, but maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, to give you enough time to master that movement pattern.
And then also, I guess, as your programming is progressing through that periodized calendar that we talked about last time, you might see some of these movements repeat, right? So you might be doing barbell back squat, but when you start moving into a new phase, maybe you're reverting back to a dumbbell squat or goblet squat to kind of revisit those movement patterns.
Yeah, just because you move past a certain movement doesn't mean you can't come back to it. Right? Even the most experienced weightlifters will have errors in their technique from time to time. You can look at the example from an Olympic weightlifting movement like a barbell hang clean, or a power clean. Even the most elite national level weightlifters will fall into bad habits. So at times they might need to pull back. Instead of doing a full hang clean, they might just revert back to a regression of that movement, like a barbell hang high pull. And if they really need to focus on bar path, they might use that regressed movement to fine tune the bar path and then return to that hang high, to that hang clean if they want to.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense to me, so hopefully it makes some sense to you all too. But if you have more questions, of course, you can always connect with us. Volt Athletics on Twitter and Instagram, as well as support@voltathletics.com to Bo and I directly. So thanks again, Bo, and we'll talk again soon.